Rolling?
Yeah.
DAF Pei Zayin Amud Aleph. And I decided to do a construction project for you. It's a simple piece of paper, but I want you to imagine for a moment that this is a plank of wood. And we're learning the sheet of Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya, which we saw yesterday, who basically says that even though normally, in order to have a mechitza teluya, in order to have a suspended wall, or really an enclosure, to allow you to draw water when your house is abutting a lake or some other body of water, you need to have a box that has no top and no bottom. And we say good achis mechitzta. We say that the walls go all the way down to the bottom of the water, and that allows you to take a bucket, put it through that box, and draw water, and consider it to be still within your rishus hayachid. Okay, Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya has an even greater chiddush, and he says that even if you have a horizontal plank that's made out of wood like this, as long as you've got the dimensions of 24 tfachim by 24 tfachim, and you've got a cutout of 4 by 4 tfachim in the center, then we allow you to imagine as if it's folded over on all four sides, so that you've got 10 tfachim going vertically down to create that box. Okay, even though it's not there, he says you can use your imagination, and you can create that box in your imagination by bending to be kofef. You bend it over, and you've created a box that creates a rishus hayachid underneath this hole, this cutout hole over the water. Okay?
Where'd you live with a 10 tfachim?
Well, if you've got 24 by 24 tfachim and you've cut out the center of 4 tfachim, then you've got 10 tfachim in all directions. And that's the minimum shear that you need for a vertical wall to have a mechitza teluya. You need 10 tfachim. Okay? So that's the sheet of Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya. And there are many Tanoim who don't subscribe to that. But we had said yesterday, and we're going to see it again, Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya was only lenient under certain conditions. Now, comes along Abaya, and he says something quite interesting, that really, using Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya's shita, you can get away with a board that's even less than 24 tfachim by 24 tfachim, which is the same thing as 4 amos by 4 amos. He says, "Uladiver Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya haisa smucha lekoisel b'pachos megimel tfachim tzarich sheyeh arucha daled amos v'rochva chadasar umashu." So he says, he makes the following argument. His argument is that if you've got this plank up against the wall, right? If you got it up against the wall that's abutting, that's on your house, and you put it up with L braces up against your wall, then you shouldn't need a plank of 24 by 24. All you should need to do is you should need this. All you need is this. Basically just one tefach of a cutout over here, that's one tefach by 4 tfachim, and then just secure a plank that's 11 tfachim and a mashahu by 24 tfachim, secure it to the wall at a distance of less than 3 tfachim, so you've got a little bit less than 3 tfachim of space, so that you create lavud, so that it's considered to be connected to the wall. And then because you've got this one tefach by 4 tfachim cutout over here, then you extend it to the wall, and you've got a 4 by 4 tefach cutout when it's up against the wall, right? And the wall itself can act as one of the vertical mechitzas. So you shouldn't have to have a plank of 24 by 24 tfachim. You should only need a plank of 11 and a mashahu by 24 tfachim if it's up against the wall. That's Abaya's argument, and it seems to be able to work. And furthermore, Amar Rav Haisa Zakufa Tzarich sheyeh gova asar tfachim v'rochavav tfachim ushnei mashahuyin. Furthermore, I could create a scenario, according to Rabbi Hananya, where you would need a plank of even less than 24 by 11. Here's the situation. I can create a situation where all you need is a plank that is 10 tfachim by 6 tfachim. No cutout holes, nothing, and it'll work. You know how you do it? So imagine that this is, here, we'll just fold it over to be able to give you the illustration. This piece of paper is now a plank that is 10 tfachim high, and only 6 tfachim wide. Instead of positioning it horizontally, position it vertically, take 2 braces, attach them to the wall of your house, and then at the end of the braces, make sure that it's within 3 tfachim of the wall of your house. Position the board vertically, and then you have lavud that considers this to be connected, and you now have, and all you have to do, since this is 6 tfachim wide, imagine that the edges on either side of one tefach and a little mashahu is bent over like that, and you've created a mechitza that has 4 walls, because using the principle of love, you got one wall here, one wall of your house, and then the 2 side walls using the 1 tefach of this board plus the 3 tefachim of lavud, and you've got a 10 tefachim high box that works all the way around it. That should be your enclosure as well. So you've got a plank of much less than 24 tefachim by 24 tefachim if you position it vertically.
The last side facing this, is that it's only 5 tefachim wide?
It's 6 tefachim and 2 mashahuyim.
So
Because you got to bend over either edge, 1 tefach and a mashahu.
So each side doesn't have to be 10 tefachim.
The height is 10 tefachim. The height is 10 tefachim, 4 by 4 horizontal.
It becomes
right?
like a tube in a way.
It comes like a tube, exactly, or a duct, someone said to me would be a more accurate depiction because it's square.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Rav Huna says you can go even further. I can go even smaller than that. And Omer Rav Huna berei de Rav Yehoshua haiso medis bekeren zavis tzarech shehegova yud tfachim v'rochva beis tfachim u'shnei mashahuyim. He says I'll go even better. I'll say that you can have a plank that's just 10 tfachim high and 2 tfachim and a little bit more than 2 tfachim wide. In what scenario? Where instead of having just a plain flat wall abutting a lake, you've got 2 walls abutting the lake that form a corner. And if they form a corner, so all you have to do is put out your braces to hold up a vertical wall, and put up the vertical wall of 10 tfachim high and 2 tfachim wide, and imagine it, since you can imagine something being bent over, imagine it being bent at a right angle, so that it's 1 tefach and a mashahu by 1 tefach and a mashahu, and it's lavud, it's considered to be, and distance it within 3 tfachim of your wall, and you'll end up having 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, and the other 2 walls will be the corner, the two corners. And so therefore, all you need when you can put it up against the corner area, is all you need is just a board that's 10 tfachim high and 2 tfachim wide and a little bit more than 2 tfachim.
I don't understand why you mean love. If you're considering the tefach mashu to be part of that wall anyway, then shouldn't it be 4 tefachim away from the wall? So then you have a tefach mashu, and then
Lavud is 3 tefachim.
3 tefachim, but you have a tefach mashu for each side.
That's right. So therefore, it needs to be within 3 tefachim of the wall. To add the 1 tefach, you need the dimensions of your box have to be 4 by 4 tefachim.
Right.
So you're distancing it at a distance of a little bit less than 3 tefachim to create lavud. Plus, you need to supplement that to get up to 4 tefachim on each side. So that's why the plank has to be 1 tefach and a mashu on each side. So then just have a plank that's 2 tefachim wide, and you can imagine it being bent at a right angle. And that you also solve the problem. So basically the Gemara says that you can go even further with this thought experiment, and therefore the Gemara says, "Be'elahad Tanya Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya Omer Gezustra sheyesh ba'dalet amos al dalet amos chokak ba'dalet al dalet umamali eichem mishkachas la." With all of these innovative ways of creating a situation where the plank does not have to be 24 by 24, then under what circumstances does Rabbi Chananya require a full plank that's horizontally positioned that's 24 by 24? We just clarified that it doesn't have to be that much. Answers the Gemara, Mishkachas la, Hecha Mishkachas la, de avida ki asisa. When it's freestanding. When you have a freestanding plank that's out in the water, it's suspended by four posts that go down into the water. That's where, because it's not connecting to a wall, where you can say, well, then you can use the wall of the house as one of the 10 tefach walls. That's when you'd need to have a full 24 tefachim by 24 tefachim, and you can imagine each side of the hole being bent downwards vertically. That's where he would require it. So in a scenario where you could create a situation where you have this freestanding dock that could connect to your house as a Rishus HaYachid, then you could get your bucket to go down in there and draw water from there. So, and the word asisa is like a mortar. It's a container for grinding things. So it's just basically a freestanding object. Let's go on. The next Mishnah. Switch gears a little bit. Amas Hamayim, which is related to our previous Mishnah. Amas Hamayim shehi overes b'chatzer. If you have a stream that is running through a chutzner, it starts from outside. Obviously, there's a body of water that comes from the outside, enters into your chutzner, and leaves afterwards. You want to be able to draw water. Ein memalin hemenu b'Shabbos. You are not allowed to. Ela imkein asal mechitza gavo yutfachem b'chnisa uviyitzia. It's usher unless you create a partition that you insert into the recess of the stream itself, both at the point of entry into your chutzner and at the point of exit from your chutzner. And the reason why you have to do this is because if not, then the stream itself, because it comes from outside your chutzner and occupies a significant amount of space. Someone please open up the Gemara for Benny, please. Then the halacha requires that the halacha is that the stream has a din of a karmelis. It has a din of a karmelis. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says kosel sha'al gaba teidon mishon mechitza. Now Rabbi Yehuda here is consistent with the Rabbi Yehuda that we saw in the previous Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda in the previous Mishnah had said that when you have a reservoir that is between two chutzers, it is not necessary to insert a mechitza inside the reservoir in order to create a division. As long as you have a wall that runs across the top at the ground level over the bore, then that's sufficient to create a division. It's the very same Rabbi Yehuda who says that when you have a stream coming in from outside your property, as long as you have a wall of your chutzner that goes over the stream, then that's sufficient. You don't have to actually insert the mechitza inside. And the reason we said was because Rabbi Yehuda holds of the principle of good achis mechitza, that we allow you to create that wall going imaginarily downwards into the stream, and to create that partition, even though you're not doing anything that is recognizable specifically for that stream. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maisa ba'amar shel Evel shahayu memalin mimena al pi zakenim b'Shabbos. And Rabbi Yehuda says, I'll prove my point to you, because in the city of Evel, there was a stream that ran through the town and ran through individual people's chutzers, and the Chachamim allowed them to draw water without having to make any special accommodations to those streams. So Amrlo mipnei shelo haya ba kashir. So the rabbi said to him, that's not a raya. The case over there was different. The streams that ran through individual people's chutzers were so small that they did not have the requisite shear to qualify as a karmelis. Again, as I said, we'll see the Gemara will define it, but when something comes, a karmelis runs through my property, so then I'm not allowed to transfer items from it to my chutzner and from my chutzner to it. It maintains its status as a karmelis, provided that it has the minimal shiurim of a karmelis, which as we'll see is that it has to be a stream that's at least 10 tfachim deep and 4 tfachim wide. So now let's take a look at the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, asula b'chenisa v'lo asula b'yitzia, asula b'yitzia v'lo asula b'chenisa, ein mamalan hemena b'Shabbos, elim kein asula mechitza yitfachim b'yitzia uvakenisa. So the Brisa clarifies and it says that even if you made a partition at the entry point but not at the exit point, or vice versa, you're still not allowed to draw water from that stream on Shabbos until you actually create a partition both at the entry and the exit points. And the mechitza has to go down 10 tfachim into the stream. Presumably the same machlokas that we saw yesterday as to how to position the mechitza, is it from the bottom, is it from the top, and so forth, would be there would probably be a similar discussion as far as how to position the mechitza in the stream. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kosel she'al gaba tidon mishum mechitza. And Rabbi Yehuda, of course, in the Brisa is consistent with what he says in the Mishnah, that if you have a wall of the chutzner that runs above the stream at ground level, then that's sufficient. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maisa ba'amas hamayim shahisa ba'a me'evel letzipori v'hayu mamalin hemena b'Shabbos al pi azikenim. So Rabbi Yehuda says there was once a story where there was a stream that ran from the city of Evel to the city of Tzipori, and the people of Tzipori used to be able to, and probably from Evel as well, you would be able to draw water when the stream ran through their individual chatzeros. So Amrulo, and again, they didn't require any special mechitza to be inserted in the stream. So Amrulo misham raya mipnei shlohaisa amuka yutfachim v'roch v'dalid. They said that's not a proof, because in that situation, the streams that ran through individual properties, at that point, the stream was less than 10 tfachim deep and 4 tfachim wide, in which case it didn't qualify as a karmelis. Now, Tanya Idach, now we have another brisa, and which says as follows: Amos hamayim ha'overes bein hachalonos, that if you have a stream that runs between two windows, which means you have two houses on either side of a stream, like in Venice or in Holland, right, where they have streams. Canals, right, canals. Good, exactly, where they have canals running through the city. So, pachos migimel mishalshel deli umemale, gimel ein mishalshel deli umemale. So if it's less than 3, now what the it is going to be defined by the Gemara momentarily, so we'll see. Now you and I had just seen that it has to be 4 tfachim wide in order to qualify as a karmelis. Here the brisa says if it is less than 3, then you can take a bucket and draw water from the stream and bring it into your house. However, if it's 3 or more, then it's no good. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer pachos midalid mishal shel dli umamale, dalid a mishal shel dli umamale. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel disagrees. He says if it's less than 4, then you're allowed to draw water. If it's 4 or more, then you're not allowed to draw water. So the frek the Gemara b'mayaskinan. When we talk about the 3 and 4 in this brisa, what are we talking about? Ilema ba'amas hamayim gufa. If you're going to tell me that we're talking about the stream itself, meaning that there's a machlokas whether the stream qualifies as a karmelis, whether it's 3 or 4. So the Elahadachi Asa Rabdimi Amar Rabbi Yechanan ein karmelis pachos midalad lema kitanai Amar lishmaite. The Gemara says, but Rav Dimi had cited Rabbi Yochanan as saying that if you, in order to suffer something to qualify as a separate rishus of a karmelis, it has to be at least 4 tfachim wide and 10 tfachim deep or 10 tfachim high. Are you suggesting, says the Gemara, that this is a machlokes, and that Rav Dimi was only going according to one opinion of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, but according to the opinion of the Chachamim, a karmelis can be defined of something of 3 tefachim? That we've never heard of before, and that sounds to be contrived, says the Gemara, because it seems like this is the first time this idea is being introduced, that Rav Dimi was not going l'kuli alma. Ella ba'agafeha ulahachlif. So the Gemara rather says, you're right, that's not what the brisa means. The brisa is talking about a stream which is a karmelis because it's 10 tfachim deep and 4 tfachim wide. What is the brisa discussing about 3 tfachim and 4 tfachim? Not the width of the stream itself, but the width of the river banks, or the banks of the stream that are at the edges of the stream abutting my house. In other words, the house is not directly over the water, but rather the house has a little bit of land right outside of the house that is the bank of the stream, of the canal, that is right by my house. And that's the point of the brisa, and it's saying like this, that what? Ula hachlif. It's telling me as follows: even though I'm not allowed to draw water directly from the stream into my house, because the stream is a karmelis and my house is a rishus hayachid, nevertheless, if there are banks that are smaller than 3 tfachim, then those banks qualify as a makom petur. A makom petur is a free zone, which we've learned about many times before. It's a very small domain, but it is distinct from the Rishus HaRabim or Rishus HaYachid where it is currently residing, and therefore you're allowed to transfer from a Rishus HaYachid to a Makom Petur, and from a Makom Petur to Rishus HaYachid, and the same thing is true with the Rishus HaRabim. And therefore what the Bryce is advocating is like this: even though you can't take the bucket and take it directly from your house and drop it into the stream, but what you can do is take the bucket, drop it onto the bank, which is a Makom Petur, that's perfectly fine, and then from the Makom Petur you can drop it into the stream and draw water. Then when you bring it back, you drop it on the bank, that's the Makom Petur, and from the Makom Petur you bring it back into your house. That would be a good system. And the machlokas, therefore, between the Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is what are the dimensions for something to still qualify as a Makom Petur. The Chachamim say it's got to be less than 3 tfachim wide, and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no, it can even be less than 4 tfachim wide and still qualify as a Makom Petur. So the
too narrow for a bucket.
What?
It's too narrow for a
No, 3 tfachim is a foot. Is a foot. Yeah. So you still have room. So frak the Gemara v'haki asa Rav Dimi Omer Rabbi Yochanan makom shein bo arba al arba mutter livnei rishus hayachid v'livnei rishus harabim lakasef alav uvilvad shelo yachlifu. But 1 second, says the Gemara, it's the beferish halacha cited by Rabbi Yochanan that says what? That although you're allowed to take an object from Rishus HaYachid and put it on a Makom Petur and vice versa, and you can take an object from a Rishus HaRabim and put it on a Makom Petur and vice versa, one thing that you're not allowed to do is that if you have a Makom Petur that divides between a Rishus HaYachid and a Rishus HaRabim, you can't place an object from a Rishus HaRabim on the Makom Petur and use the Makom Petur as an access way to go from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. That's called being machlif. That you're not allowed to do. You can't use the Makom Petur as a gateway to get an object from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. And why is that? It's Gzeiras Chachamim, lest you come to transfer it directly. So how could you ever advocate that you can use the banks of the stream as a gateway to get a passageway to get from the Rishus HaYachid to the Carmelis? It's not going to work, even if it qualifies as a Makom Petur. So the Gemara answers, Hasam Rishuyos de Oraisa, Hacha Rishuyos de Rabbanan. The Gemara answers, the only time that the Chachamim were machmir and disallowed you from using the Makom Petur as a passageway, as a bridge to get from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid, is when you're dealing with two domains, such that if I did the transfer directly, I would be over on an Isser Deoraisa. But here, it's only from a Rishus HaYachid to a Carmelis via the Makom Petur. At best, it would only be an Isser Derabanan, and therefore the Chachamim did not prohibit the act of being machalif via a Makom Petur. So the Gemara now says, V'ha Rabbi Yochanan b'Rishuyos Derabanan nami Omar. But wait a minute, we didn't learn this long ago. Rabbi Yochanan had also commented that even when it comes to rabbinically prohibited transfers, you still cannot use a Makom Petur as your method of transfer. Ditznan, kosel shebein beis chatzeros, gavoa yutfachim v'rochav arba'a. Now we're just going to recite the Mishnah that we've learned just a few days ago. I think it was last week that we learned this Mishnah. That if you have a wall that divides between two chatzers and there's no doorway in the wall, so ma'arvin shnaim ve'in ma'arvin echatz, then these two chatzeros, because there is no passageway from one to the other, have to make separate eruvin. Hayu barosho peros elo olin mikan va'ochlin ve'elo olin mikan va'ochlin. If the wall that is between these two chatzers is 4 tfachim in width, so then the width of the wall itself is considered to be a separate rishus that is shared equally by both of them, and therefore if there is produce resting on top of the wall, both sides are allowed to go to that area, and that wall has a din of a carmelis, so they can go to the top of the wall and eat produce on the top of the wall, but they may not remove it off of the wall to bring it into their respective domains, because they may be transferring from a carmelis to a rishus hayachid. Nifratzak, then the Mishnah continues. This really, I have a little bit of a question why the Gemara had to quote this part, but it quotes this, I guess, to be comprehensive. Nifratzakos el adeser amos ma'arvin shnaim v'imrotzu ma'arvin echad b'mnei shuhu kepesach. That if there's a breach that forms in the wall, as long as the breach is less than 10 amos wide, then you have a passageway from one chutzner to the other, and if they want to, they can make separate eruvin, or if they want, they can make one eruvin and incorporate both chutzers together. Yoser mikan ma'arvin echad vein ma'arvin shnaim. And if the breach is wider than 10, then it's all considered to be one chutzner, and they can only make one eruv for both chutzers. They cannot make individual chutzers. And then the Gemara says v'havinon ba. And if you recall, we had a long discussion about this Mishnah that ein bo arba amai, that what if the wall would be narrower than 4 tfachim wide? What would be the halacha if it is not 4 tfachim wide? What is the status of the top of that wall? So Amar Rav, then we had a machlokus between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Rav had said, Avir beis b'shuya sholetis bo v'lo yazis bo melo nima. Rav says you have to be more machmer, so that even if there's produce on top of the wall, you can't move it because it's not its own separate domain. It is sort of controlled by both parties to their mutual exclusion, and therefore you can't move anything, even a hair's breadth, on top of that wall. And for Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Elu malan mikan v'ochlin, ve'elu malan mikan v'ochlin. And Rabbi Yochanan disagreed. Rabbi Yochanan had said, no, the top of the wall is a makom petur, And therefore, it's perfectly fine not only to go up to the top of the wall and eat the produce, but you can even remove the produce from off the top of the wall and bring it into your chatzar, because it's a makam petur, and you can always transfer from a makam petur into a rishus hayachid. Va'azda Rabbi Yochanan l'taimei, and Rabbi Yochanan is consistent. Dichi asa Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan, makam she'ein bo arba'a al arba'a, mutar livnei rishus harabim v'livnei rishus hayachid lekaseif lekaseif alav u'levad shelo yachalifu. So the Gemara says, as Rabbi Yochanan had said, Rav Dimi had quoted Rabbi Yochanan as saying that you're allowed to transfer from a makam petur to rishus hayachid and from a makam petur to rishus harabim, provided that you don't use the makam petur as a bridge to get from a rishus hayachid to rishus harabim. That's the term of being machalif. So the Gemara says, you see that even though Rabbi Yochanan permits you to take the produce off the top of the wall because it's a makam petur, he does not allow you to take produce from Chatzar A to put it on top of the wall, and to have someone from Chatzar B remove it from off of the wall. Now there, the worst that you'd be doing if you transferred from Chatzar A to Chatzar B would be an Isser D'Rabbanan of transferring from one Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid where there was no Eruv made, which is an Isser of Carmelis. It's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. So you see that being Machalif according to Rabbi Yochanan is Asr even when there's only an Isser D'Rabbanan involved. So how can you tell me that it's permitted to transfer with the bucket using the banks of the stream? The Gemara answers, Hahi Ze'eri Amra. So the Gemara answers, Ze'eri was the one who had quoted Rabbi Yochanan in that Gemara over there as saying that you're not allowed to be machlif in the case of the wall. But according to Rav Dimi, who's another Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan, you would be allowed to transfer when you're using a makam petur when the Yisr is only an Yisr D'Rabbanan. So frak the Gemara ul Ze'eri Kashya, but according to Ze'eri, how is Ze'eri going to understand the Brisa? The Brisa can't be talking about transferring using the banks of the stream as your makam petur, because according to him it's also to be machlif even with an Isser D'Rabbanan. The Gemara answers, Ze'eri mokim la ba'amas hamayim gufa v'ravdimi tanoihi. The Gemara says, okay, you're right. According to Ze'eri, the only option you're going to have is that when the Brisa says that there's a machlokus as to whether it is less than 3 or less than 4, according to Ze'eri, that's discussing not the banks of the stream, but rather the stream itself. And therefore, it'll turn out that according to Ze'eri, he will argue with Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi seems to be saying that according to everyone, a Carmelis is defined as 4 tfachim wide and no less. But according to Ze'eri, it's actually a machlokus whether a Carmelis is defined as an area of 3 tfachim or more, or 4 tfachim or more. So now the Gemara, the Gemara concludes that. But the Gemara says, but I have another question. Now that you've explained that as long as the stream is not a Carmelis, because it's less than 4 tfachim wide or less than 10 tfachim deep, then it's okay for me to draw water like we had in the city of Avel. I have another question. Why don't you say that it's like the holes or cubby holes or the indentations that are abutting a Carmelis? Now, what is the Gemara referring to? We had seen a long way ago in Maseches Shabbos and earlier on in Maseches Eruvin that if you have a wall that is opens up to a Rishus Harabim, meaning the wall is abutting a Rishus Harabim, then even small indentations that are in that wall, a little cubby hole that is in that wall, is part of the Rishus Harabim as well, because it's in the airspace of the Rishus Harabim. It opens up into Rishus Harabim, such that if I were to take a pebble and throw it from a Rishus Hayachid and it were to land in what we call the Chorei Rishus Harabim, this cubby hole that opens up to Rishus Harabim, I will have done a Malacha Deoraisa because I've transferred from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim. So the question that I have is, says the Gemara, even if this stream right now does not qualify as a Carmelis, but since it opens up into a Carmelis on the other side of my Chatzar wall, why shouldn't it still be considered to be a Carmelis and call it Chorei Carmelis? Just like we have Chorei Rishus Harabim, that's something that opens up into Rishus Harabim is itself Rishus Harabim, so too something that's a stream that opens up into a Carmelis should qualify as a Carmelis. And therefore, even if the stream is narrower than 4 tfachim, it should still be usher for me to draw water from it. That's the Gemara's question. And Abaya bar Abin v'Rav Chanina bar Abin da'amri t'Ravayu ein chorin lekarmelis. One answer that's offered by these two Amoraim is that that's a chumrah that we only say by Rishus HaRabim. We don't have such a chumrah of chorei, of cubby holes that are abutting a carmelis. If it's a cubby hole that it itself does not have the dimensions of a carmelis, then even if it is abutting and opening up into a carmelis, it does not qualify as a carmelis. Rav Ashi Omer afilu tema yesh chorin lekarmelis hani mili b'samucha hacha b'muflages. Rav Ashi says I have a different answer. Even if you say that there is such a concept of chorei carmelis, but that's only when it opens up directly. It's abutting directly the carmelis. But here the stream is removed from the area of the river or the stream that is a 4 tfachim wide. It's extended into my chutzner, and there's a distance between where it was 4 tfachim wide as a carmelis and where it is currently now in my chutzner, where it's narrower than 4 tfachim, and therefore that doesn't qualify as a chorin for a carmelis. And Ravina Omar. Okay, so those are the two explanations as to why a stream that is narrower than 4 tfachim, that even though it opens up into a much wider stream, it does not qualify as a carmelis when it's in my property. Now we get to Ravina. Ravina is going back to the original brisa that we were analyzing for the last several minutes, where we were trying to understand what's this machlokus between 3 and 4 between the Tanakama and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. If it is 3, or if it is less than 3, it's okay. If it's less, according to Shimon Gamliel, if it's less than 4, it's okay. We didn't understand what the less than 3 and less than 4 was. One opinion was it's the dimensions of the river or stream itself. Another explanation is that's the dimensions of the stream banks. And Ravina comes up with a third opinion. Ravina says, no, we're talking about the creation of a mechitza at the entrance point and at the exit points of my chutzner, which is what the Mishnah says I have to do. What if I don't create a full contiguous solid mechitza of 10 tfachim deep and 4 tfachim wide? What if instead I take 2 planks that are narrower than 4 tfachim and that are 10 tfachim deep, and I put them at a distance from each other to allow the stream to continue flowing through my property? So I don't completely block off the flow of water of the stream when it comes into my property, but I put up 2 partitions to allow in between the 2 partitions water to continue flowing. Is that considered to be a valid partition or not? That's the machlokus in the brisa. The Tanakama says as long as the partitions are within 3 tfachim of each other, we apply the principle of lavud, and we say that it's considered to be one solid partition and it's kosher. According to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, he's even more liberal, and he says that as long as they're within 4 tfachim of each other, we apply the principle of lavud. And the Gemara says, "Va'azdu Rabbana l'taimayu, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel l'taimei." And this is the consistent machlokas between the Rabban and Rav Shimon ben Gamliel regarding the law of lavud, which we've seen in several places already, that there's a machlokas whether lavud is less than 3 tfachim, or according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, lavud is less than 4 tfachim. We've got to go weiter. I'm sorry. The Mishnah now says, Gezustra. Shehi lamayla min hamayim ein memalin hemena b'Shabbos elim kein asu lamachitza gavoa sar tvachim bein milamala bein milamata. By now you should be familiar with this Mishnah in your sleep. The Mishnah basically says that if I have a plank or a ledge that is protruding from my lakefront house, then if I want to be able to draw water from the lake on Shabbos, I have to have a hole cut out into the plank. Plus, I have to construct a box or a duct structure that is a 10 tfachim vertical mechitza, like a box. The box has no top, it has no bottom, and I have to secure it or attach it in some way to that ledge that is protruding out of my house. But the Mishnah says I can either put it on top of the ledge against the hole, or I can put it below the ledge, which was the illustration that we were more used to, where the box is below the hole of the ledge. And either way, if I do it that way, then I can lower my bucket through that box and draw water from the water that way. So, v'chein shtei gezustros zula mayla mizu, asul elyona v'lo asul tachtona, shtein asuros ad sheyeh arvu. And similarly, says the Mishnah, and here we've seen this case also just a few days ago, if I have 2 ledges, because I got 2 neighbors, because it's an apartment building that is abutting a lakefront, the lake, then if I've got 2 ledges and one ledge is slightly higher than the other, then if they made the box for the top balcony, but they didn't make the box for the lower balcony, then because these balconies are proximal to each other such that they both built these balconies, and the two neighbors have access to each other's balconies, they have to make an ERU in order for one person to be able to, for either person to be able to use the mechitza teluya, to use this box in order to be able to draw water on Shabbos. The Gemara now says, Masnisim de lo kechananya ben Akavya. This Mishnah is not like Chananya ben Akavya. The Tanya Chananya ben Akavya Omer Gezus Sheish bo Dalad al Dalad Amos Chokek bo Dalad al Dalad Umamale. Because according to Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya, you don't literally have to construct the actual vertical box, because remember, according to him, all you need to have is a horizontal plank that's 4 amos by 4 amos, and that's sufficient. So you see that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Chananya. The Gemara says no. Amar Rabbi Yechanan Mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra Lo hitter Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya ela biyama shel Tveria hol v'yesh la ognayim v'ayoros v'karfefos makifos osa avol bishar meimos lo. No, I could argue that Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya is consistent with our Mishnah. The only time that Rabbi Chananya holds that a completely horizontal plank is sufficient was only in regard to the Yam Kinneret, the lake by Tveria. Why is that different? The reason that's different is because there is so much infrastructure surrounding the entire Yam Kinneret. You have houses, you have fields, you have very high lake banks, such that when you look at this body of water, it really looks like a completely enclosed area. And that's why he was extremely makel to allow you to have that completely horizontal plank. But when you have a body of water that is not as enclosed, it's much more out in the open, there Rabbi Chananya would also agree that you have to create the actual vertical box without a top and without a bottom. So the Gemara now says, now that we're talking about Rabbi Chananya in relation to the community of Tveria, let's go and take a look at a brisa. Tana Rabbanan Gimel Dvarim Hitter Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya la'anshe Tveria. There were three things that Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya permitted. I guess he was one of the poskim in Tveria, and he permitted the population of Tveria to do three things. Number one, Mimalin Mayim Migizuz Torah b'Shabbos. He said you can draw water from a horizontal ledge on Shabbos, which was the case that we just saw. Next thing is v'tomnin be'etza v'tomnin be'etza, that you're allowed to take the chaff of produce and use it as a storage or an insulation for produce. And the chiddush over here is that even though the chaff that you're using, the wood chips or the straw that you're using is moist, the moisture that comes in contact with the produce does not act as a machshir to prime the produce to be makabel tumah, to contract tumah. And the third thing that he was lenient with is umistavkin ba'alontis, that you're allowed to dry off with a towel after coming out of the bathhouse on Shabbos and Yom Tov. We'll explain that in a moment. So let's go through these three cases. Mamalin mayim megazustra b'Shabbos. You're allowed to draw water out of this horizontal plank on Shabbos hada omer. That's what we just got through discussing. Second case is v'tomnin be'etza maihi. What's the case of being allowed to insulate with the chaff that is moist? What is that case? The Tanya hishkim lahavi psoles. Im bishvil sheyesh of tal harehi b'chiyutan, v'im bishvil shelo yivatel mimalachto eina b'chiyutan. That the halacha of the Mishnah is like this. Now, when you wake up early in the morning, there's dew. There's a moisture that rests out in the field on all of the surface of the field. If you go out early in the morning to harvest some chaff from the field, then there's moisture on the chaff. So the question is, why did you go out so early? One reason could be is because moisture is helpful for the preservation and the proper ripening of the produce, and therefore you wanted the chaff dafka to be moist. Well, if that was your motivation, so then you want the moisture, and therefore the moisture that hits the produce is machshir it to be makabel tumah. Because that's the general rule, that when you want the moisture, then it acts as a machshir. It acts as a primer to make the fruit susceptible for tumah. But let's say you went out early into the field not because of the moisture that's in the early morning, but rather because you got to go to work. And that's like if you ask someone, why do you go to the 6:30 minyan in the morning? One person could say, because I have insomnia and I like davening at 6:30. Another person could say, I hate waking up so early, but I got to go to work. Right? It's the same thing. Why do you go out so early to get the chaff out of the field? The answer is because I got to go to work. That's the only time I have in the day to go out there. Well, if that's your motivation, so then the moisture that's on the chaff is not your objective, and therefore it's not going to act as a machshir. So Rabbi Chananya paskin that v'stam anshe Tveria kimishalo yibotam imalachto dami. He said the people of Tveria are extremely industrious. They're very busy people. They've always got work to do. Halavai, that industry should return to the northern part of Israel, the way the Gemara is describing it, so that people should be so busy by Tveria. But they're very, very busy people. And as a result, he says, that's why they go out early in the morning to gather the chaff, not because of the moisture, but because they got work to do. And that's why he said that the moisture that's on the chaff does not prime the produce for being makabel tumah. And finally, the third thing that he said was, "Umistafkin ba'alon tismahi." What does it mean? You can dry off with a towel. He says, the Tanya, the Brisa says, "Mistafeg adam ba'alon tisumenicha b'chalon, v'lon yimserena lu'ulyarin mipnei shechashudan alo sodavar." That the halacha is that when you come out of the bathhouse using cold water, because you're not allowed to use hot water in the bath on Shabbos and Yontif, but if you use cold water, then when you come out, you're allowed to use a towel, but we're not worried that you're going to wring out the towel and be over in the malacha of schita. But what you should do is you can't carry it home with you. Put it immediately in some cubby hole in the bathhouse, leave it there until after Shabbos, because we're worried that if you bring it home with you, you may forget and you'll wring it out. You also should not give it to the bathhouse attendant. Why? Because bathhouse attendants are suspect of wringing out towels so they can use it for their next customer. So don't give it to the bathhouse attendant. That's pretty yucky if you ask me. But in any event, Reb Shimon Oimer, af mevio biyado l'soch beisa. And Reb Shimon says you can even bring the towel all the way back home with you. And therefore, Rabbi Chananya, basically what he said is that it's okay to wipe yourself off with the towel. That was the psak that he gave, consistent with, and it's not clear whether he goes like the Tanakama or like Reb Shimon, but for one thing we know is we're not worried that you're going to wring out the towel just because we allow you to dry yourself off with it. You have a wonderful day.